As we discussed in the last lecture, the real Ingalls family didn't consistently move west. Just to review, Laura and her family actually moved from Wisconsin to Kansas, back to Wisconsin, on to Minnesota, east to Iowa, back to Minnesota, and then on to Dakota Territory. But even that might not be quite accurate. Charles Ingalls and his brother-in-law, Henry Quinner, bought land in Chariton County, Missouri in 1868. It's possible that the Ingalls family moved from the big woods of Wisconsin to Missouri and then to Indian Territory the following year. In Wilder's autobiography, Pioneer Girl, which will be published for the first time later this year, the action opens not in the big woods of Wisconsin, where Wilder's first novel begins, but in Indian Territory. Wilder didn't write about any childhood memories from Missouri, and other than courthouse records and county documents that indicate the family actually purchased that land, it's impossible to say with any certainty that Wilder and her family lived in Missouri when she was just over a year old. Still, in a way, you could use the term missing years to describe what might have been the real Ingalls family's brief experiences in Missouri shortly after the American Civil War. But that's not what I'm going to talk about today. Rather, I want to focus on the real Ingalls family's experiences between 1876 and 1878, 2 years that Wilder completely skips over in the Little House series. But first, some clarification. The Little House books, of course, relate big chunks of Ingalls family history based on Wilder's real experiences in Wisconsin, Kansas, Minnesota, and Dakota Territory, what's now South Dakota. We'll sort through the fictional and non-fictional elements in the Ingalls family saga when we discuss these novels later on. But for now, let's skip ahead to 1876, shortly after the Grasshoppers returned to Walnut Grove, Minnesota, Plum Creek in Wilder's fiction, and devoured Charles Ingalls' small field of wheat for a second time. In Pioneer Girl, Wilder recalls that Pa said he would not stay in such a blasted country, and during the summer, the family left Minnesota and moved not west, but east, to Burr Oak, Iowa. Charles and Caroline Ingalls threw in their lot with friends from Minnesota, the Stedmans, and decided to help them run the Masters Hotel. This decision, as well as the family's experiences in Burr Oak, aren't part of the Little House series, nor is this. In the autumn of 1875, before the family left Minnesota for points east in Iowa, Wilder remembered coming home from school one day. "We found a strange woman getting supper," she wrote, "and a little brother beside Ma in bed. We were very proud of him and always hurried home to see him." That's right. Wilder had a brother, Charles Frederick Ingalls, born on November 1st, 1875. In Pioneer Girl, Wilder remembered that little Freddie, as the family called him, didn't have much hair to comb. As the Ingalls moved east the following summer, Freddie became ill and a doctor was summoned. But, Wilder wrote in Pioneer Girl, little brother got worse instead of better, and one awful day he straightened out his little body and was dead. He had lived just 9 months and died on August 27th, 1876. Many critics and Wilder scholars have assumed that Wilder chose not to include episodes from her Burr Oak, Iowa experiences because they were too painful, that she didn't want to relive the loss of her baby brother and the memories surrounding his death. Yet, when Wilder's daughter Rose questioned her mother about this creative decision, Wilder explained, "It is a story in itself, but does not belong in the picture I am making of the family." In other words, Wilder felt that her real family's experiences during those missing years were not thematically consistent with the world she was creating for the fictional family. Nor were the experiences she recorded in Pioneer Girl consistent with those the fictional characters of the Little House books were likely to encounter. During those missing years in Burr Oak, Wilder herself became a town girl. Initially, she and her family lived in the Master's Hotel, right next door to the saloon, as she called it. They were exposed to experiences that weren't exactly wholesome. Pa and Ma didn't like the saloon next door, and we were a little afraid of the men who were always hanging around the door. But it wasn't just the saloon that exposed Wilder and her sisters Mary and Carrie to a more worldly and gritty environment. It was the townspeople themselves. In Pioneer Girl, Wilder recalls a steamy love triangle in seduction, an abusive neighbor who dragged his wife by her hair and tried to set fire to their rooms, and perhaps most disturbing of all, a brush with sexual abuse when she was 12 years old. Wilder, who was living away from home, was tending a sickly neighbor. Wilder awoke in the middle of the night to find her neighbor's husband leaning over her own bed. "I could smell the whiskey on his breath," she wrote. "I sat up quickly. 'Is Nanny sick?' I asked. 'No,' he answered. 'Lie down and be still.' 'Go away quick,' I said, 'or I will scream.' He left, and Wilder returned to her family's home the next day. During these missing years, Wilder worked in the hotel alongside Ma and Mary. She hired out to other families. She lived away from home. To put this in perspective, Wilder was not quite 10 years old when the family moved to Burr Oak, yet she experienced life there as a young adult. The hotel didn't pan out, and Charles Ingalls moved his family into rooms over a Burr Oak grocery store in 1877. Money was tight, and Charles Ingalls struggled to find work. Eventually, he began work at a feed mill and moved the family into a rental house, a little red brick house on the very edge of town, Wilder remembered. There, on May 23, 1877, Wilder's youngest sister, Grace Pearl Ingalls, was born. We're not sure exactly when the fictional Grace Ingalls was born. She just suddenly appears in By the Shores of Silver Lake, when Wilder tells us that even baby Grace had had scarlet fever. And then in the third chapter, describes the new Ingalls sister as the family prepares to take the train to Dakota Territory. Grace sat still in her little starched white dress and bonnet, her feet in small new shoes sticking straight out. After Grace's birth, the family's fortunes took another dive, and later that same year, when Wilder herself was just going on 11, she remembered that she learned that if all the debts were paid, doctor bills, grocery bills, and rent, we wouldn't have enough money to pay our expenses. Then Wilder relates that Pa did something the fictional Charles Ingalls would never do. He skipped town without paying the rent. Pa was very angry, Wilder wrote. He said he always had paid all he owed, and he would pay everyone else, but he'd be darned if he'd ever pay that rich old skinflint Bisbee, their landlord, a cent. Well before dawn, under the cover of darkness, the Ingalls family left Burr Oak and didn't stop until they were safely across the county line. And where did they go? Back to Walnut Grove, Minnesota, Plum Creek country. Again, Wilder chose not to fictionalize the real family's second experience living in Walnut Grove, Minnesota. In the novel, On the Banks of Plum Creek, the fictional family moves from a dugout into a snug, comfortable little house that Pa builds for them, and the family stays there until Pa is offered a job in Dakota Territory. The fictional family remains true to its roots, farm people who look forward, never backward, always moving west. Yet, in reality, once Charles Ingalls sold his Minnesota farm in 1876, the family became town dwellers for almost 3 full years, first in Burr Oak, and then again when they returned to Walnut Grove in 1878. And the family's fortunes continued to spiral downward, ending in Walnut Grove with the tragedy of Mary Ingalls' illness and blindness. But we'll take that story up later, when Wilder's real and fictional worlds began to align more closely as the Ingalls family moves west into Dakota Territory. One other quick point about episodes from the real family's missing years in Iowa and Minnesota. Wilder's daughter, Rose Wilder Lane, mined this material and created at least 2 short stories based on her mother's memories from Pioneer Girl.